Hey there, it's Dusty Thunder with yet another Reddit story for you. This one is AITA and is titled, Am I the Astronaut for Telling My Dad He's the One Who Gave Me the Ultimatum, so he needs to deal with the consequences. My mom died when I, 17 male, was 5. My dad remarried when I was 8, and he made a blended family with his wife and her 2 kids. Then they had 2 kids together, so I have step and half siblings. My mom's family were a big part of my life for the first 6 years, and then my dad and them fought because my dad had met his wife by then, and he didn't like their reaction to the news. Essentially, he wanted to invite them over for my grandparents' yearly family barbecue, and my grandparents didn't want to include them. They told him they couldn't accept my mom's replacement. He got mad at them for feeling that's what he was doing, and he told them that they could forget about seeing either of us again. He tried to keep me from them, but they filed for grandparents' rights, and Dad's lawyer said they'd win, so he said I could see them once every 3 months for 4 hours. It was way less than I was used to, but it didn't stop me from being close to them. He invited them to his wedding and they didn't come. It pissed him off more, and he then got super weird about it, and he suddenly started demanding invites again for his wife's kids. And when I was invited, and then when my half-siblings were born, he was including them in the attempt to force my family's hands. But they never invited them. They did ask me if I wanted them there, and I said not really. So they didn't change their mind. Okay. So the not really is a red flag for OP right now. Dad's got a bunch of red flags on his own, but not really wanting your siblings there doesn't help the situation at all. So they didn't change their mind. My dad always bitched about them whenever my visits would come around. He really hated that I went and my step and half siblings couldn't. He tried to tell me that I should advocate for them to all be included. I never replied to him because it was easier not to. Once I turned 14, he got worse with that stuff, and he complained that I was calling and texting them and that I kept in touch more than once every 3 months. He'd tell me that they hate my siblings, that they didn't want us to have our family. I told him that didn't upset me or make me mad, and it didn't change that I wanted to see them. The day I went back to school senior year, my dad told me since I was graduating in May and I'd be 18, he needed to make it clear that I will need to choose because I can't keep spending time with people who refuse to include most of my family. And he told me I'll have to choose my family or them, quotation marks. I told him them were my family and I would choose them. He didn't expect that answer. He got pissed and told me I should always choose siblings over extended family. Then he acted like I hadn't given my answer because he told me when he and his wife throw me a graduation party that I won't be allowed to invite my mom's side. I told him he didn't need to throw me one because they would. I had made it clear my choice will be them. Dad told me that isn't how it works. I told him it is because he gave me the ultimatum and he needs to live with the consequences. He accused me of twisting his words and disrespecting him by throwing that in his face. Am I the astronaut? Okay. Time out before I go into some top comments here. Walking back my red flag for OP a little bit because the more I thought about it, as I was reading the rest of the story, I realized he was still a kid. He wasn't even 14 by the time when they asked him. Now, here's what I do see. I see dad as a major asshole, and I see grandparents as major assholes because they're both trying to weaponize the child. Grandparents are weaponizing OP against dad and making the decision be on OP, and it should not be at all. It should not be on a kid to make that decision, period. Also, for them not being accepting of new members of the family, I call that bullshit too. Candy Thunder disagrees with me. I call bullshit on them for not being accepting because they could have grown their family here and really loved them. And I don't see him moving on as him replacing their daughter. Now, him trying to force it on them is not cool. Him forcing it and not letting it be their choice. We would never force it on anybody. We wouldn't like it if they tried to exclude them, but we wouldn't play this game where we tried to force it on people. We wouldn't try to disallow them from spending time with them, and we sure as shit wouldn't weaponize our child against them. Dad's the biggest asshole of all here for weaponizing him and for trying to force this, and what, for 13 years this being the play? He lost his mom when he was 5. I don't know when they got remarried.
1 year later.
It was 1 year later. Okay, well, that matters. All right. Top comment, NTA, you are in no way wrong. That's how an ultimatum works. He knows that. 1, your father had no right to try to replace your family. 2, your father had no right to try to insert his children and stepchildren into the lives of people that were holding on to the last living representative of their deceased daughter. 3, your father had no right to try and separate you from people that love you. 4, you lost a parent that will forever be in your heart. Your father should have respected that. Agreed. 5, lean on your mom's family as they love you. Your father is in love with a fantasy. Now, there is this notion that that people with kids, if they lose their partner, can never move on, and that's kind of resonated in here, and I don't agree with that. However, I think if you are a parent who loses your loved one and you're contemplating moving on, you probably need to give it some time and acknowledge that your children are hurting too. It kind of doesn't seem like OP's dad was hurting at all. If he moved on that quick and remarried a year later and then tried to force it on everybody, and this is where he becomes a major asshole, forcing it on people, not making it our family, but him making all the decisions and then forcing it on everyone else. That does not make a family. That creates a dictatorship. Some families are dictatorships, but they're not real families, I would say. And in this case, he did that, and maybe they already knew that about him, or maybe it was the speed at which that he moved on that caused grandparents to ruffle their feathers. I don't like how they treated the situation, but he's definitely the aggressor here. We only have OP's version of the events, though. Truth, of course, always. Well, not always, most of the time. Sorelia, I think you were married so fast because he was hurting, hence why he tried to insert the new fam with old. And the problem with that is that maybe that works for him. You as a parent don't get to make that choice for your child. And if you do have to live with the consequences of the damage that causes. Just like he has to live with the consequences of the ultimatum that he forced here. He forced his son to make a choice, and his son made a choice. And he's like, oh, well, since you made the wrong choice, I'll ignore it. No, sorry. You told me to choose and I chose. I get it. They were made uncomfortable. And instead of taking the time to make people feel comfortable, make them feel seen and talk about their feelings and let them grieve, Dad's like, the fastest way to fix this is to put somebody else in her place as quickly as possible and put even more people in the family. It's kind of the bury it with busyness mentality, right? I don't like the kid being weaponized at all here. And I know Dad did it for sure, right? And it looked like grandparents were doing it, but I understand what you're saying. They could just be temperature checking with him. I'd like to hear a different level of feedback here, and let's see what her angle is. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in this stream, a Sunday afternoon stream, sporting her very own Cute Chiefs fit, we have Candy Thunder.
I'm just gonna, hi guys, a recap. So mom passes away when OP is 5 years old. And then in my understanding, he says dad starts fighting with family after they'd been in his life for 6 years. So that would make him 6. And I would assume that's when the stepkids came into play at 6. And dad was trying to force this family dynamic because that's, in my opinion, what the dad had known. But you don't get to force a family, especially 1 year after their daughter just passed away. This is how I'm taking what OP has said. And so you're automatically putting people on the defensive because you're trying to force in a new person into this family dynamic when everyone is still grieving the loss of a mom, a daughter, like whatever that is. And you can't force that family dynamic. And if I was a parent and I had lost my child at that age and had grandchildren, I would not be ready to accept a new family. And I'm probably going to get defensive. I'm probably not going to see what you're seeing. I think the dad, I can't even fathom trying to date someone a year after, like if something happened to him. In my opinion, I think that's why the dad is so mad, because maybe he enjoyed, maybe he enjoyed that family. Maybe he loved being a part of that family. But you can't just bring in another person once someone has died and plug them into a hole and be like, accept these kids that have no relation to you, that I've brought into your life. That you don't get to make that call. You don't get to tell people who they have to accept and who they have to love. I feel like OP's grandparents, they're a tie to his mom, and he probably doesn't want people interfering with that tie. Like that's his one connection to his mother, who is no longer here. And his dad, instead of understanding that and seeing that, has just turned it into some kind of war shit show where he has to now pick between the two, instead of being like, when you're ready, maybe we can try to compromise, maybe we can try to bring our families together. Ask on one.
Hit the button. Go for
Great.
it.
In my opinion, you're gonna lose your child because you have made them choose instead of letting them have both, letting them be loved by more people, or making him choose and saying he has to cut off his ties to his mom. You need some
So-
self-reflection, and you need to grovel to your child.